welcome to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca, and today I'm going to be telling you all about the Caister Castle Car Collection, which is somewhere that we visited with the Women Drivers Social Club a couple of weekends ago now. And I mentioned it in the podcast, but I said how I thought it was probably big enough and interesting enough to warrant an episode all by itself. So that's exactly what we're doing. We went along on the Monday of our trip, and it is worth noting that if you are a car club and you get in touch and you say that you're bringing along a big group with a classic car display that will be in the car park for a bit of time, you do get a bit of a discount on your tickets. So it is worth getting in contact with them, and I found it relatively easy to get in contact with them. I just rang them up on a day that they were open, and was able to speak to one of the ladies, I think, in the ticket booth, so they knew to expect us, and yeah, a lot more straightforward than, say, the East Anglia Transport Museum, which I did struggle with a little bit. Now, Caister Castle has been on that particular site for an incredibly long time, and it was actually built to act as a kind of defence against the French, as it used to be that the sea came right up to where the castle was, and so they were able to use it as kind of a defensive position when need be. But I believe it was built by a private individual for that purpose, and so that is on the site as well and is included in your tickets when you go in. You can go in and around all of the castle grounds, well, ruins really, and then there's some parkland, a tea room, and obviously the car collection. Now, the car collection is believed to be the biggest privately owned car collection that is open to the public, because all of the cars that are in the museum are owned by one family who were looking for somewhere to host their car collection and open it up to the public, and they had the choice between the Caister location and somewhere up in Blackpool at the time, and the bonus of Caister was the castle that came on the grounds that they were looking at, and so that's why they went for that location. And it is a really lovely place to explore and go around, so they made a pretty excellent choice, I think, in terms of location. They had lots of land there, and then they were able to make the purpose-built building for the collection. And you can see as you walk around it that extra areas were added on as the collection has expanded over the years, as more cars have either been added by the family or donated by people who had an interest in kind of keeping the collection relevant, and also having a bit of their motoring history kind of preserved. And so it is a really interesting place, and what really made it particularly interesting for a lot of us that went along on this trip was the volunteers and staff that were in that building with the cars. They were all incredibly well informed about all of the cars and stuff that were in there, about the building, about the site, and so it was a really interesting trip for us, and they were able to tell us lots about what was going on there and about how the collection came to be, how the building has progressed over the years, and also, I guess, the saddest information in the fact that none of the cars in there are ever really intended to go out on the road. They have their fluids all drained, they have their kind of system all sorted out, and then they are primarily all rested up on blocks, and so that the wheels don't get flat spots and stuff like that, and put in as found and displayed as found. So it does make for quite an interesting display in terms of the fact that some of these cars are in various different stages of use when they were found and when they were added to the collection. But it is kind of a little bit sad that there are some really rare items in there, and really unusual items and things that you'd never expect to see anywhere, that are never really going to be seen out on the roads, seen doing what they were initially intended to do. So it is kind of a bit of a mixed feeling as you go around, but there is certainly a lot of love for the cars that they have on display, and a lot of love from people that have been and experienced it or have connections to it, because there is quite a lot of cars, as I kind of hinted at, that have been donated over the years by people. I believe there was a Spitfire in there that was donated by a man whose wife had it for a very long time, I think maybe since new, had so many lovely happy memories of it, and in the last few days of her life had said, please make sure that my Spitfire is going to be looked after for the rest of time, to the best of your ability, which is a huge responsibility when someone you love says that. And clearly the best option available to him was to make sure that it was preserved, and that her love of the car and that her story of the car was preserved in the museum. And it is kind of a little bit heartbreaking as you go around and you read about that and a few other cars that have been donated in more recent years, where someone's had kind of this really strong affinity to a car, and in a lot of ways people can't imagine anybody else driving it, and so a museum like Caister, where the cars aren't intended to be driven again, is perhaps a great option for them. I'm not sure personally how I'd feel if anything happened to me and Peggy was still around, about the idea of somebody else going out and driving it and enjoying it, but I'd like to think that we're custodians of it, and so it outlasting you, you've done what you intended to do, and hopefully someone else can get some enjoyment out of it. And I guess in the museum people are going around and seeing it and hearing the story and enjoying it, so maybe it isn't quite as sad as we think it is off the bat. But yes, it's a really fascinating place, and as I mentioned, there is some really rare and unusual stuff that you'd never expect to see there. Now, something I personally went in there looking for was a Singer Airstream. It's based on a Singer 11 with a completely different bodywork that was put on by some coach builders. It's a completely pillarless design, so the B pillar isn't there, so it frees up that space to have bigger stuff going into the car. There's famously a picture of a bandmaster who had bought one for every member of his band to be able to get their instruments and stuff in. And an incredibly rare car. We only know of two within the Singer Owners Club, one being the one in Caister Car Collection and the other being in New Zealand. And so I remember that quite some time ago we'd gone along with one of the Singer clubs and had a look at it, but back then you weren't able to take any photos and things in the museum, so it was quite nice to actually be able to get up close, see it, explore it, and take in some of its really uniqueness in a little bit more detail and be able to look back on it. Something I had no idea was there, and again, having been, I think I must have been 7 or 8 when we went, but I had no recollection of it being there, or that they even existed, was a car that isn't even really a car, but it excited me so much that I stood there absolutely buzzing having seen it. And it's actually 2 cars, and not far on from where the Airstream is these 2 huge beasts of vehicles that you look at and you think, oh my goodness, what on earth are they? And you do struggle to kind of identify them. And you look at them and then you read the sign. And for those of you who have listened to the podcast for a while, you might know that I absolutely adore Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, as most people who are into cars do. And if you remember the film, right at the beginning there is a scene where Chitty is involved in a lot of historic races and involved in a crash that ultimately ends Chitty's racing career. And obviously in those scenes there are several other cars that are all competing, and there was 2 of those cars there on display. They were both built on Phantom chassis, and then one of them has a Phantom engine, and the other one I believe has some form of Ford V8 in it. And they are just huge, monstrous things. They're massive, obviously kind of mimicking things like the Beast of Turin and other big early motor racing vehicles, and they're just fantastic to see. Totally fabricated, not meant to be any particular, but just kind of evoke the feeling of it. And I had no idea that these cars even still existed. I had no idea that they were in a museum, that they were still kind of around. I didn't even really think much about the fact that they were cars that would have been made for that film, that they were fabricated to create that scene, which is crazy, because I've said time and time again that something I would love to one day be able to do is create and own a Chitty in that style of before it became Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, because again, my fascination with that era of motoring, it is just a fantastic thing to see and enjoy, and I think it'd be such a cool thing to own. And yes, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that, but hadn't really thought about what that would involve really, and actually seeing those and being able to kind of look at them and realise what they're made of, what went into them, was really fascinating, and also quite informative for somebody who might one day want to kind of recreate something like that. But yeah, to see them, and it was so surprising to me to find them there. I mean, there were so many fantastic cars and so many kind of stories and things like that, but that was a huge highlight for me, because yeah, it's such a formative film in so many people's lives when they love motorsport and classic cars and stuff like that. So it really was just totally surprising and just brilliant to see. There was also an exception to the rule there. There is a vehicle that has been restored, and it's had a lot of detail and work put into it, and there was a lady stood near it who was able to give us so much information about it, but it is an electric Harrods truck that was used to transport goods from Harrods to people in London who had bought them in their big posh houses, and also do some of the deliveries into London. A very early electric vehicle, and it was found in quite a state of disrepair, and part of the kind of agreement that they could display it alongside some other kind of Harrods historic memorabilia was that it was restored to a state that was a good representation of what it would have been, and for it to be kind of such a unique find and vehicle. They put an incredible amount of effort into making it, at least aesthetically, look like it would have done in the day. I don't know if it runs, I can't remember what they said about that, but it is a very beautiful thing to see. And again, another one of these unusual, I had no idea that even existed, things that was in this museum, which was brilliant to see. So we had a really fantastic time there. We got there, I think, for about 10:30, and we were in there for a good few hours, going around the cars, talking to the staff and the volunteers, getting to know a little bit more about the vehicles and the work that goes into kind of preserving them. And yeah, we just had an absolutely fantastic time. It's a car museum that's often kind of forgotten about and overlooked, and I think it's one that perhaps more of us should be making a bit of an effort to go to. I know that it is a little bit out of the way over towards Norfolk, which isn't a place that many people are often passing through, like when you go into the British Motor Museum or perhaps Bewley or something like that. But it was fantastic to go back to it as someone a bit older and a bit more able to appreciate what was in there, to take it all in, to see some of the fantastic bits and pieces that have been added to the collection over the years. And it clearly is an incredible kind of passion project for the family that own it, and it's lovely to see that level of passion happening on a kind of private scale with that amount, but still being open to the public for them to go and see these things that otherwise, I mean, goodness knows what would have happened to those two cars that are totally fabricated from Chitty Bang Bang, because I feel like it's the sort of film that the popularity of it has grown since its release within certain groups, and so when those cars were kind of done with their time on screen, the interest might not have been there for many people to keep hold of them, to keep them safe, and to keep them as they kind of are in the film. And as a result, they might have very easily been broken down for their parts, because obviously some of the parts involved in them are quite rare and quite sought after by certain people. But to see them as they should be, with a little screen grab of the film that they're in, is such a cool thing that fully was not expecting to see. But yeah, we had a brilliant time walking around. The little tea room is really that. You can get kind of tea and cakes and a couple of little savoury snacky bits. Not a huge amount of stuff. And I do wish that there was a little bit more of a gift shop. You guys know that I love collecting little bits and pieces, particularly patches for Peggy's blanket, and there was kind of no sign of any gift shop bar a couple of postcards. And I feel like even a few little model toys and stuff like that would go down well with the sort of people that are going there. And interestingly, I found online a patch for the museum from several years ago. Several years ago. I suspect it's kind of 60s or 70s or 80s that I was able to put onto Peggy's blanket. But that suggests at some point there was a bit more of a gift shop there, and I've managed to get hold of one for Peggy's blanket after the fact. But yeah, a bit more of a gift shop I think wouldn't go amiss, and might help it become even more popular in the automotive circles. But it's got a great big car park, a great area for kind of having a decent group of people coming along and putting on a bit of a display. So well worth it if you're over in the area like we were. Not to be missed, I'd say. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing a little bit about this perhaps not so frequently covered automotive treasure in Norfolk, and you might consider adding it to your next trip into the east like we did. If you've got any kind of questions about it, please drop them down below, and if you too are fascinated by these two survivors from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, I'd love to hear about it. But in the meantime, thank you very much for listening. Drive safely and happy motoring.